Yeah, didn't get anywhere, did you? Dumbass. You fucking live here.
Wow. See if I can go straight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
You're getting 3 seconds. Oh, this speed is higher. Oh, these aren't apartments.
They're apartments.
No, I think they're condos. Or at least houses.
That's pretty. Wow, you just ran through a stop sign.
This is not a drive. This is a court or circle. These are all condos. Island Drive. It curves around and turns into Island Way.
Oh. So pretty.
Yep.
Circle.
That's for sale. Centralized mailbox. That's cool. Looks like it's this blue thing. Plaque Collective.
Let me check it out.
Probably expensive, but you can't come out. Oceanland Drive. The all the way on the stop sign is upside down.